Yo, how's everyone doing? We made it. This is True Crypto 28, Mr. Anderson on Twitter. Doing an update. Haven't been able to do one of these publicly for a little while. I can try to get into as the how and the why, but long story short, I've made some videos for my members, but had some internet issues. First and foremost, I got sick. I had the flu pretty badly, and then also was going through some internet issues, which actually are still persisting. I have Comcast out here daily trying to resolve it, but I'm getting a little bit of flash. Intermittent connection just goes out for like 5-10 seconds, but on the live stream it sort of messes everything up, so I haven't been able to really do one of those. But I wanted to get one of these out. I know when I do the live streams, it's a lot easier for me anyway, but for this one, I'll release it publicly as well. Just the review for some people that only watch these. Last time we spoke, we were in this general area here, right? This general area would be, the upper 7,000s. We did a very good job on stream getting the bulk of this down move, even this short covering rally, we were able to catch pretty well as well, which we were happy with. But we were also able to create a situation to where, aside from catching that, we identified this as directional bias to the downside, rode most of that down, and we're fortunate enough to see some things in here to ride it up. So from that standpoint, at least on these videos and things of that nature, not to say anyone's perfect, because we never are, but basically did a really good job of catching everything from once the 10-2 break happened way back here on the way down, this one on the way up, and then this one. So thank you, Lord, that it worked out that way. Was able to play it pretty as well as identifying this one pretty early. That I seen some things that I had liked for the long term, and basically the way I work. Someone asked me about this question anyway, so I wanted to address it, which is, when you say station to station, exactly what are we identifying? Basically, pretty simple. Station to station. When I see directional bias is down, now there's how to do that. Obviously, is a little bit different. That's something I teach my students as well. But ultimately, once you identify that hey, the directional bias is down, then it just means I want the majority of my trades to be to the short side on that asset. And then trying to identify, like, okay, we've created a situation to where it's risk off for a little while where you don't have any long trades, and then maybe we see something on the low time frame that might spark an interest where we see a little confluence to say, hey, you know what? It's not that the directional bias is up, but maybe I'll take a counter trend trade because I see something that's extreme. Now, perhaps you missed that, and that would be completely okay. Most important would be to try to keep the majority of your trades with the trend itself. So once we pop back up, same type of scenario. We watched and monitored for a little while. Then we were crystal clear at this point that, hey, everything's to the downside. It certainly was that. We observed again for a little while. This was chop zone, of course, and then very clearly in here said, hey, you know what? Things are looking very good again, and played it the whole way up on the last stream. I think we were in the high 7,000s. It was pretty clear that things were going to at least 9. And they did that, and then we identified that obviously in Discord that, hey, this was another money spot. It ran up again. We identified this as a money spot. Again, whenever I say that, doesn't mean, hey, I'm perfect, I'm the best, or anything along those lines, or that I even caught all those myself. But we did identify them on Discord, so I'm not gonna say that we didn't. But ultimately, it's just more about catching up on where we're at. This is never gonna be a stream that's about claiming I'm the best ever or anything along those lines. That's a silly concept in general. If you ever hear anyone say that they're the best ever in trading, just know for sure they absolutely are not, because it's a silly statement to begin with. So, regardless, here we are. This line, what is this line here? So what are we looking at? So this is something interesting. Since I have it on the screen, I'll bring it up. So these were like monthly zones. Let me just confirm this, and I believe it was, right? So these blue lines here, we were looking at something that is a monthly level. And sometimes when I do this, everything gets distorted, which I probably shouldn't have done that. But this was like a tweet that we put out. So we're going month to month on a closing basis, which we are over that line. And then we have this one here, which is wick to wick, right? I'm not going to spend too much time on this. Let me just kind of go back and see if I can correct this on the lower time frame. But the whole point, what was interesting, see how that got twisted? So this should be connected on the blue line right there. Okay, so basically the idea was pretty simple. This blue line here was gained, right? So now it's above a monthly closing level. Now reality is you want to hold that level on monthly close, and we're what, February 24th. So we got a few more days left in the month, and that's where this battle is, because you could end up in a situation where you lose this particular level, and now it looks a little bit like a rejection on the monthly scale. Again, no point in talking too much about that since we have a close in a few days anyway, and we can look at it then at that point. But that is something that's very interesting. It is interesting also that it held it. basically gained it, excuse me, even on a low time frame, held it. This is all the way down to a 4 hour, and it hasn't had a break of it since that time, since we drew it so perfectly. Now, you could say, well, what if you go down to a linear scale, which I would say, hey, that's a good question. You had some traversing, you then took it, so it's a little bit better position on the linear. When I'm over a long time frame, and this is a pretty long time frame, obviously, I do tend to use the log scale, so I would lean towards that, but I think both matter, so you want to keep an eye on both. Why? Because other traders are looking at one or the other as well, so you want to just keep it in mind. Okay. But on this stream, I'm not going to go too deep. I'll probably do another one of these tomorrow, and we could talk, kind of continue more about the longer term type of action. On this one, I'll talk about local price action a little bit and just see where we're at, because it is an interesting place. So let's just clear some of this out and start fresh. Go to a daily. Give me a couple moving averages if we can. Those will work. That's fine. Perfect. Give me a 200 or two. Thank you. All right. So I apologize for that delay right there. Okay. So it's very interesting what's going on. I mean, first and foremost, I would want to look at this. You want to know where the monthly's at. We're 4 days away from the month, so maybe right the day before I'll look into that again. We'll look at the weekly for now, though, right? Very interesting point again. Some things that are going on from a perspective. You know what? I shouldn't have brought these moving averages up just yet, because it's going to clutter my screen. Let's just look at the price action alone. So we had a lot of interesting things. Well, local, here we are. If we're just going to look at basic support and resistance, we ran into a few different levels, but I mean, pretty obvious that we ran into this guy. I mean, if you remember, we came in, pivoted right here, ran up again. This was a big, massive run. It's a huge run up after this. This looked ugly, right? Bearish engulfing of that doji type candle. And then here we go, another bullish engulfing right after. Blow off top, come down, pivot, go back again, etc. And then, of course, this was our little pivot candle. And you see that's kind of where we rejected, as expected. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. Of course, when you're doing things at scale, things get pretty stretchy, so you're not going to be deadly accurate. I can tell you one thing that I was pretty clear about. Everyone on Discord can verify that. Look, once we had this set up, I was crystal clear. I had no interest in looking for a hero short at all. Now, some people like to do that. They do it very well. I know guys that nailed the top. I've said that. God bless them. That's good. It just wasn't my interest. Why? Because if I take this really quickly to a daily scale, there were people, a lot of people looking for a top in here, looking for a top in here, looking for a top in here. And when I say top, I mean like a legit pullback, significant to the midpoint, to the golden ratio, 61% of the move, maybe even deeper. And in my opinion, by being in a situation to where I said, look, I might take a low time frame short if I see one pop up on the hours that I'm normally trading, then great. But other than that, I wasn't looking to hero short the top of any of this. So my biggest trade that I had, I ended up exiting just above 10,200. It was after this top where we had some situations where we started to see things come into light, and it looked like a couple times it was showing some quote unquote bear divergence on a daily scale. It didn't quite play out. Then finally it did, right? So you see that divergence right there to right there. I won't draw it out right now because I want to save some time, but you see the RSI lower, price higher, and then finally got to confirm local top here. Great, a little bit of a pullback, but still it tried to come back. Good battle at 10-2 every time we saw it, which is just reminds me of the good old days back here when we had these huge battles at 10-2. That was our drop-off point. If you guys recall, where we said, all right, once we lost 10-2, we were dump susceptible, and that's when the dumping began. Interesting level. It should matter, of course. There was a lot traded there, and it should take some time to work its way through, and certainly it's trying to do that, if not trying to peel itself back. So it is indecisive right now. It's not a very easy area at all. Again, I know people that are playing this area perfectly well, and they're doing a great job. I'm not trying to do that just yet. I'll show you why. I'll get back to the weekly scale. I just wanted to bring this part up. Is that, look, it served me well to say, you know what, I got a very bullish mindset, and therefore I'm going to let things run. Maybe look for buying dips only, which we were successfully able to do. We were in on this, buying dips here, etc., and then creating a situation to where this got tricky. Still was looking to hold. I was holding over, I think 60% of my position all the way to this top, which looked almost short at the top. I had a good reason to short at this, or at least cover. I shouldn't say short. I almost closed my position there, which I did not. I survived this dump out, and then on this, I think it was in here. I think it was somewhere in here. It was about 10.2 and change on average, but that was on MEX, not on Stamp. But regardless, doesn't really matter. The point is somewhere either here or here, not sure, right in that 10.2 area, which was pretty good. And the point that I was bringing up of that extended conversation is the fact that had I been looking for a short, I think it would have thrown me off a bit where maybe I would have covered in here or in here. Covered over there and I was fine. By the way, when I do that, I might cover at 10.2. I don't care if I buy back at 10.6. It's not even in my mindset. That anyone that thinks that way, I promise you're setting yourself up for a disaster. That has nothing to do with trading. You make a trade, I assume, to make money, right? So if you get caught up in these finite elements of like, look, listen, I exited here and then I had to buy it back more expensive. I don't care where I buy it back. It's another trade. It's not even on my mind. I care about the probability of a successful trade, nothing else. So if this area is worrisome, I exit at 10.2 and it climbs to 10.9 and peels back to 10.6 and holds and I buy there, good, great job. It's about minimizing that risk and more importantly, minimizing the risk to my account now as it stands, right? It's never about what I could make. I don't care about that part at all. I mean, that's nice, but it doesn't help me. Unrealized profit and loss, things like that don't help me. Realized profit and loss is what helps. Protecting what I have, that's what helps. And that's what's going to get you ahead. But anyway, as bearish as some of this is, and when I say bearish, look, market structure is bearish on a daily scale. I mean, there's no way to deny that. You came up, you topped, you failed, so you put in a lower high. Bearish engulfing, another possible lower high. We'll see if we make a lower low just yet. It hasn't occurred. But there's some elements that aren't so bad either. First of all, when we go up to the higher time frame, which I will in a moment, and then second of all, there's some constructive elements happening here on RSI. Now with the RSI, you don't know exactly where it's going to peel off and stop, so we'll see how that plays out. I mean, sometimes you will have the benefit of seeing some support fly in, like just as you would with with the price action, and we see that that didn't play out, but there's zones, right? So you could say, hey, here's one here, etc. Don't look at the price action and compare, just look more of the line. So in this case, what I would do is I would come in, look at my top, look at my bottom side, and I would say I would ideally like to see this hold, but that brings you all the way down to 40, which means there's a lot of room there. I can draw in some scenarios here where I could say, hey, you know what, I could possibly see something like this holding right here. And of course, we'll talk more about that, but I could be completely off, and it might end up being something like this, where this runs through about this 8,600 type level or thereabouts, or 8,000, 9,000. We'll have to see if that's the case, but we don't want to jump the gun on any of that. My point is patience. Right now, it's an exercise of patience, right? Saboli, we chill out, we relax, calm down, and wait. And ultimately, I'll show you a couple more reasons as to the how and the why. Again, I'm not willing to throw away the spot that we're at. It makes a lot of sense to go a little bit lower, of course, but also when we get into this, forget the weekly. Let's just look at the 3-day, and then we'll jump into that weekly as well. 3-day also just has something right here too, right? So you held this. Even just looking at this little top side, you could stretch this out here to the close as well. And that's support, right? You have, if I got rid of that element, I can get out here. Oh, really? You don't want to work? Really? All right, fine. Suddenly that Control Z is not working. All right, here you go. So here we go. We had this situation unravel what? If we go in the past and kind of just see how this played out, even if we go to, but 3 days fine. Let's use the 3-day and we can change it up, right? So we came down, pivoted, had a hell of a rally going back in the day over here, right? And we could say, all right, hold this area here. I mean, you're going to have some big zones when you're doing this, and think price gets stretchy. That's just part of life. And you basically dip back in here. You didn't lose a level, right? You got another bounce out of it. Okay, great. Then eventually the big candle theory, you broke through. Okay, now we're talking about resistance, right? In this area, right about there. Okay, see that area? We can extend that out a few different ways if we like, but let's just look going station to station again. So if I had a downside bias, okay, maybe I covered from here. We're going to have to add some areas. This can get a little bit messy on your screen, but it's important to do this because of what? You dumped out, see some resistance to pop up right here on this 3-day. I'm going to extend this over here at this point because I never got outside my box. My box would be just like this. Let's just say you bring it out as far as you like, but let's just say I'm looking at this little top side to get over it. That was my open. I would like to at least get in there and above my wick. So I would like to see it close above that area. Just didn't occur. All right, that's life. And what happens? You dump on out. even lose this area again. This has the possibility of resistance. Didn't happen. It was a fake out on the scale. Drive up, big candle, but what? It was a short covering rally, ran to the old resistance, couldn't pop through it, bled out again, retest, down again, hold for just a little bit, but couldn't give too much. Again, these are 3 days each, so we say a little bit. That's really about a 10-day period, but that's okay. Dumped through this side again, didn't give much resistance on the upside. Why would it do it on the downside? And we made our way over here. You could draw in some more of these, of course, if you need to, as you're peeling down, but previous resistance I won't get into. We start climbing our way back, and now we're starting to see these areas again to unfold. And what I would want to do, of course, is then look at this downside, top side, etc. I'm going to shift these over. We have this, but really what I'm looking at here, now there's a few different things you can choose here, by the way, guys. And the one I would choose, just if I was going to do this the proper way, because I have, the way I look at this was like this. Just like this, right? So you see what we got here: close, close, rejection, break, right? And then the same type of rejection here through that extension here, okay? We could say the same thing, high. Well, that's going to be too, I'm forgetting that I'm on a 3-day. Forgive me, guys. This is the problem you have when you go to 3-day, which is an awkward time frame like this. Close. All right. So what you do is you'll take a closing point to a closing point. And you could even see you could stretch this back further, but I'm kind of getting off subject here. I wasn't trying to get this confusing, but the idea is that we had this some sort of triangle descending, more like a descending triangle. Obviously, you had that bouncing ball type of feel where you broke down less and less, come back up, couldn't gain it, right? So what do I have to do to gain it? Well, I could say, oh well, I got this wick here. I need to get within the wick. That's fine, but can we confidently say like yes, we've gained it because we started to close in this area, which was the whole point that I was trying to make? What I would say is no, right? Ultimately, what I want to do is I want to scale this out, right? So I want to go into a 3. I know I had to go down to the daily to show you what I meant, but really I want to go into a weekly scale because you're going to get clear circumstances on that weekly, right? Hopefully I didn't lose any of it there, but you could see your pivots are pretty clear when you get to this scale, which is what? You're getting rejections, right? You never made it back into that zone. Same thing. Your rejection, again, you're not clearing anything over and over and over again. And then when we did clear some stuff, what did we clear? We had this range here. You broke out and over it. Good job. You want to clear this level. Broke out over it. Good job, etc. So you'll see on the weekly, they're pretty clear. You don't usually claim them and then lose them back instantly. It can happen for sure. I mean, you could see something like this on a quicker time frame, right? You say, all right, well, this is a very bullish candle. Wait, bearish engulfing. Oh my God, bullish engulfing, and you just absolutely take off. So you could see those rip more like that. But normally, you're not having the actual full structure where it's taking several weeks, gaining something, and then giving it right back. So could I take this level is what the question is. Well, it is good. Obviously, you made a higher high. You made a higher high on monthly. Doing it on the weekly is great. And that does open the door to the possibility that you've reclaimed this particular range, right? Which would be nice. But ultimately, what I would want to do, I mean, I'll give you a couple different elements of this. I would go high to low, right? And this is all the way back at this 10.4 as the midpoint, right? So I'm looking at this 10.4. This is the open and close of the range. And I don't think there's any surprise to the fact that that's exactly where we reject it. So then with that being said, I can erase some of this, but I do want to keep this part up right there in my little box. Because basically, all I did is I just tried to figure out the open and close of the range, and then I want to see which particular candle best resembles that element to get me into the top half of that range, right? So for me to reclaim the range, I don't want to just sneak in and reject with a wick and then lose it and it's ugly. I would like to get back into the upper part of that range as we saw before, because really, if we see what happened with this box that I had drawn out here, we came in up, this was when it was fluid, right? But then it wasn't so fluid because we lost it, rejected the next week. A couple weeks later, you just dumped out, came back in, rejected again. See exactly what I'm talking about here? Couldn't make it there. So I need to get in there, right? So where is that level? Well, that would be a close on my weekly scale People can do this differently if they want, but you're just trying to find something that's relevant and different than what you have seen, because otherwise, if we had claimed it and it was clear, then we'd pretty much be off to the races, right? So ultimately, I would want to see that claimed, then I would want to see it hold, and then I would want to see us go from there, which more than likely we probably would. Doesn't mean we have to take off and fly. I mean, it could be a nice slow grind. It could be a lot of different elements of that. But this is what I would be looking for with that particular level on a closing basis. So there's a lot of work to do there. So what does that mean? It means we're kind of in between. Does that mean that this wasn't something that was a nice grab? Absolutely, this is a terrific grab right here. The fact that you're closing above that level, it was a nice candle. Think about all the damage we've done in the last 2 weeks and a day here of these weekly candles. And reality is we're only living in that last candle. So very good. And not only that, we haven't given back this level yet as well. And we can give it back on a wick, right? So giving it back on a wick is fine. You're just going to show actually some support. You're actually showing the support that exists. Just like when we look back in time at this level, what do we see? Wick, 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 right? Wick here, wick here. So we can look back and say, oh, look, this area is wicked out many different times. Now, some might prefer this level. Sometimes when you do that, when you go to the exact low of the range, look, I understand why people do it, but I have seen plenty of situations where it'll just grab that level, but didn't quite grab this level, and you get yourself caught. I also see this when you have that triangles, which is what I was bringing up on the daily scale. Sometimes you'll see the triangle and you'll get where you grab this level, not this level. Everyone considers that the rejection point, and you lose it. So it can get, it's not easy. If it was so easy, then it would just have a sign that says buy me and everyone would be happy. But the idea here is we just try to make some plans here that'll make some sense. So I know that was probably a little bit elongated, but I'm hoping that it helps some people. Probably confused more people than I helped. And if that's the case, my apologies. We'll do it a little bit better maybe tomorrow or the next day. But the idea is this: in this range, the reason why it's so interesting, this is a weekly scale, right? So now I can bring this down to my daily, which is what we're normally looking at, and say, man, we haven't even lost this on a daily scale. Forget a weekly scale. And ultimately, that's pretty sound. And that's only when I'm working on this alone. Well, what about the fact that I also have topside support here, right? And this is definitely topside support. Anytime you see one of these ugly rejection candles like this guy right here, and then price goes back and reclaims that, that becomes support, right? That's an exhaustion candle that didn't play out at all. So that's a support resistance flip in and of itself. I might take that from the high close to the point of that exhaustion and look at that, and there you go. I have one level there. I have another level here on the bottom side. So you have the top side, bottom side, and we see how healthy this was also. You came in, you put in higher highs and higher lows, higher high, higher low. So you have ultimately not only that level, but this other exhaustion candle here. And you might notice I'm not giving you anything that's crystal clear and saying, hey, this is what's going to happen, because, look, I don't know. I'm not giving up on this zone just yet. Now I'll bring back in the moving averages finally that I mapped all that out. Is it nice that you're getting a bearish engulfing here? No, of course not. But there's a lot of weird stuff going on too. This happening on a weekend for the most part, into a Monday holiday was a little bit odd. This happening again on a weekend. Now, it's very normal for a weekend to give you like opposite type of reaction, because I don't trade on the weekends. It doesn't mean you shouldn't, but I'll tell you, I never trade on the weekend. I'm sure most big institutions are not. I can't imagine that Mr. Giant Guy institutional player says, you know what, let's come in on a Saturday and make this work, unless they're just taking advantage of some people, and that's normally probably what's happening. Like, hey, let's go ahead and send it the opposite way of what we want, and then bring it back the other way on Monday or Tuesday, etc. And if anything, it probably just messes trading up a little bit, but it is what it is. I shouldn't complain about it. The idea here is that you are in a situation in which it was a little awkward, and just to me, maybe maybe it's not so awkward and I shouldn't think that way, but that's just kind of how I'm seeing it, because of the fact that you've had two different plays on weekends that rolled into this Monday. But the moving average structure is very healthy, right? So the slope getting, losing your 21, that's not healthy at all. But you also see a little bit of a downward slope here going on, but you're filling in the bubbles on the daily. The daily looks a little bit more bearish for sure, no doubt about that. But once you move it to a 3-day, the story kind of changes. Now, you're in a situation where you had already lost this 8 on the 3-day. That's fine. That happens. But you're still holding the support, as we talked about. It's already had a hold of the 13. Is it going to come in for the test of this 21 or the 55, which is white? Time will tell. On the weekly, even stronger. I mean, on the weekly, again, it's the same picture that you're seeing on the daily and the weekly and the 3-day, which is a picture of health here, right? 8, 13, 21.55. That's exactly the structure you want. You did not have that structure here, right? You see that? It didn't, things were a little bit out of whack on the weekly scale. Couldn't basically project itself or protect itself the way it needed to. If you look on the 3-day, I was looking at the weekly before, when you had this big rally, same thing. Look at this. There was no order, no flow to this, right? So what happens? Slope matters. You have downsloping moving averages. There's weights here. This thing needed to reorganize itself, and there just wasn't enough buyers to do it. You were getting no help on total as well, on total market cap. So none of that was going well. Daily, just to give you one more look here, this tried to organize itself a little bit just from that burst, just from the time that was being spent, but it wasn't meant to be. It never happened. Again, never came to fruition. This is a absolute sell signal here, a massive sell signal, a clear sell signal on multiple time frames, and it dumped out. Whereas this is a very clear buy signal on multiple time frames, right? So ultimately, you're in a situation here to where this is far better, right, than what we saw here. It's much more organized, and it has what? Anchors, right? You have protection. So it doesn't mean we can't break this one down. I know that was a long way to tell you that, look, we're waiting to see if this holds, right? If this holds on close, great. We'll start to see this guy flatten out and retest the upper levels. Now, one thing I will do in these situations, first and foremost, you do see a little bit of a parallel action going on, whether I go wick to wick or close to close. We'll let that play out over time. For me, I kind of like the close to close at the moment. But more importantly, just the top side of this is giving me a little bit of a top side. And I would bring this back, by the way, like this. Close. I'm looking at this close, to this close, to that close. Works out perfectly. No one closes outside. And then normally I'll bring this down to the bottom of the first one. You could go to a lower time frame if you want and still make this work. Something like a 4-hour because it's a very small area. And if we were going to do that, again, I would go to the high close. I'm going to drag it through, though, because I want to have something more extended when I look back. And high close to high close. So we change the structure just a little bit. Only thing I want is no closes outside. And then I'm going to go to the first closing low. And then you shouldn't have to form fit beyond that. Otherwise, you need to redo what you're doing here. So I can go low to high, still holds with the wick, still holds within the close. Good job. Holds the wicks as well. So this is decent enough, right, on the 4-hour to say, all right, here's what we have. Now, obviously, anytime we see, I shouldn't say obviously, maybe you don't understand that, but anytime you see a downtrending channel coming off of a rally, it's usually going to resolve itself to the bullish side. The problem with this is what? This whole thing, for the most part, was a channel as well. Now, it does resolve itself bullishly, but when, right? So there's not a when element in this. We don't know when you break the top side of this. That's ultimately when. So you're going to have to wait to come out of it if you want some more assurance, right? There's never certainty, but if you want a little more assurance, you got to break through. Ideally, it doesn't just explode. You would like to get a little bit of a retest there, which would be great, show a little support, and then kind of go and make another run at these guys. But we don't know when that's going to happen. As I mentioned, this could easily bleed down further. We could bleed down once we lose this level. That opens this up for sure. There's a couple different levels in here. You have the bottom side support of this guy. We have the top side here. We talked about the weekly support, 3-day, etc. Some of them are the same support, but that just makes them even stronger. And there's some questions of, all right, look, will we get into something like what? Go to a daily. Now let's bring on these 200s just as an example. Do you retest these particular levels, right? Are you going to get back into a 200 simple test at 8,800, a 200 exponential test coming up on 8,600? The thing about it is this, that we can absolutely have that happen, and that would make things, first of all, a little bit dicey. And maybe that's what needs to happen. Maybe we need things to get a little dicey. But I know I would love to buy this area, right? This is the way I think. Now, this isn't going to affect my trading, but just if we're spitballing, right, we're just having a conversation about this, I would love to buy this area. Now, funny thing about that is maybe we get there and I completely change my mind. I'm open to doing that, right? That can happen. I can say, you know what, just the way it kind of went about. Maybe it started off and I said, well, you know what, I might buy this area. And then I see how this breaks down. I go, you know what, I changed my mind. I don't like the way this is looking at all. Maybe I'm getting that bouncing ball look. So that's something that can happen. So keep watching if you want my opinion on these things to see what's coming up. But ultimately, in my mind at this point, I would love to buy 8,800. And that's what makes me think that I don't know if we're going to get it, right? I have no idea if we're going to get 8,800 just based on that alone. Now, there's a lot of other factors. something called like the Heisenberg effect. What is that? It's just that it's not already determined, and I know that's what people think. They think, man, if I can just figure it out because it's already determined, someone's got the crystal ball. Well, you know what? Someone might have the crystal ball out of the thousands of people that are doing it. And it's not that they have an actual crystal ball, it just means that they are going to get it right this time. Maybe not the other 98% of the time, but this time they're going to get it right. Good for them. I'm happy for you. But that doesn't mean you always get it right. Not at all. No. That just means that every once in a while they get lucky, and that gets people in the mindset of, hey, this guy knows. No, we don't know. We're playing probabilities, right? So the reason I bring this up is to let you know that really this whole structure is going to be designed off the public. And when I say public, I mean the professionals and the funds and everyone else that's involved, but how we're playing it, right? If things look like they're about to take off to the upside, and the funding, meaning people are overly bullish and exposing themselves to a situation to where you could say, hey, look at this, there are so many over leveraged longs that we need to take price down, then you could probably rest assured the fact that people will bring that price down. Why? Because it's not ethical to let a sucker keep his money, right? So we don't know if that's going to play out that way. If it does, then yeah, you'll drive it lower and lower. If that's the case, that's, like I said, that falls into the Heisenberg effect element where the structure itself is actually changing based on how we all collectively are playing this thing. So it's not set. It's never been set. It's not definitely going to happen like this or anything along those lines. Even if we nail it perfectly, great. I might post some things on Twitter just half-handedly playing that says, look at me, I drilled it. Maybe I did drill it, or close enough, or it's close enough that it seems special, but not really. The idea is not about that. It's about having a plan A, a plan B, maybe even a couple extensions of plan A and B depending on how they go, and then as it unravels to say, all right, this is what I like, right? So far I'm not loving how any of this played out unless you're on a lower time frame where you could do it a little short-handed. On the higher time frame, I want something a little bit clearer, right? So I would like to break over the top side of this, as I mentioned. I'll take a higher high would work. I'll take a lower low for some possible shorts, things of that nature. But I'm not into a situation to where I'm seeing absolute clarity at all. I'm definitely not ready to flip to bearish because ultimately I don't see anything in this that says bearish to me on a higher time frame. I just don't see that. On a higher time frame, I'm not seeing that at all. Can I be wrong? Absolutely. Will it hurt me to be wrong? No, won't hurt me at all. I'll be okay. I'll survive it. But this is just not the structure you typically see that resolves that way. Now, by the way, if it did flip to something bearish, that probably would be pretty ugly. But we don't need to get there anyway. It would just be some little bit of an oddity. It would be some bigger scale type of scenario where I think you would take a long time to resolve it. But again, that's so different from what we're looking at that there's no point in talking about, because here we are on a weekly scale looking like this. Let me just give you an example of when the last time we had this type of look, right? Just a dynamic look on a weekly scale. And it wasn't until about here, right? Now it took some time obviously to get there. Let's see. See, even this structure here is bullish. This structure gets better over time, right? So you gotten better, which is why you're at such a high price with that structure again, even quicker, right? So what I'm talking about, what am I talking about? 8, 13, 21, 55, very standard stuff, all above your 200. Just shows the direction. You have what? Upward sloping moving averages. You can zoom in, kind of get a look at the slope. You see the slopes are up. Things are looking good on that time frame. So what happens in these situations? Things tend to roll up from there when that occurs. Why? Pretty simple stuff is that you have so many opportunities for it to bounce. If we just look in the past here, when you had good structure, you could bounce off your 8, right? You could bounce off your 13. You could end up with a bounce off the 21, which in big bullish markets is something you tend to see over and over and over again. Now, you could also not bounce at all and restart the process and go bearish. That can happen. But look, bounce, 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 bounce. This is all because of the structure. Bounce, bounce, right? This is on a high time frame. Even on the high time frame, after you break down, bounce. This is a huge bounce. This is under 6,000 to 12,000. Bounce, bounce again, and then finally roll this thing over. That's how long it took at that scale, right? What's more impressive about this, though, is that it's happening not only on the daily, but you're seeing it on the 3-day, you're seeing it on the weekly. So to roll this over, first you're going to have to lose price on the daily, come back into this area, show it reject so that you can get these moving averages rolling under, etc. As you've seen here, how this occurred. You had this beautiful structure. bounce, 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 bounce. Now, look, of course, eventually it can roll over, which happened, and then it begins that process as well. But it takes a long time. That's why you can't skip. You're not going to say, hey, we're 9,000, we're going to 3,000. No, 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 no. You can't skip the journey, right? If you did roll over, you'd have people that would buy it back, fail on a higher time frame. Now let's go, trying to make a monthly size, lower high, that type of thing, and going from there. So again, I wouldn't worry too much about that just yet. I would focus more on what's in front of us, and there's nothing so clear. So if you were tuning in today to get clarity, I apologize. I know this wasn't the most clear element, nor did I have this completely prepared to give you in such great order. I just had a pretty busy day, so my apologies for that. But I wanted to give you guys something. What I'm looking for is I do want to see how this plays out. Obviously, today is an awkward day because you had that bearish engulfing. We're not quite closed, about 40 minutes where I'm posting this video where it's almost closed, but it does look like we're going to close under the 21. This is the 34 here. I know it's not on the screen, but I promise you it's there. How this is going to react to losing the 21 yet again, I don't know. It only gained it on the weekend. I don't know how relevant it is. The moving averages become relevant when they become relevant. What does that even mean? The key to the moving average is that it shows that it's providing some element of support and that you're basing off of it. And that just hasn't happened. So right now it's just contraction, right? It's very normal. All markets, they expand. You're going to have contraction, expansion. Let me clear everything out real quick, and then I'll wind this thing up because I didn't mean to go too long. But compression, expansion, trend, right? It's something you'll see over and over and over again. If you put on something like a simple Bollinger Band, you have a little bit of compression here. You expand it, right? You see how the Bollingers open up, right? Not a massive one, but another expansion begins here. You see them open to both sides. Good expansion, expansion. And then what's happening? Obviously, this is trending the entire time. Compression again. So we're seeing these compress again a little bit. And it's getting pretty tight again already on the daily scale. So that's been long enough. Typically, if you see 20 days of that, things are going to get pretty tight. And we're pretty close to that here. You're talking about a good 15 days. I mean, if it made it another 4 or 5 days, it's going to be very tight. And you should expect another squeeze on the daily time scale. If we look at a 12-hour, already got a little tight, had some squeezy action here. That's why it jumped around a little bit, and it's tightening up again. So I would expect resolution probably in a couple days on this, where you start to see something get out of this zone a little bit, either test to the top side of this zone yet again, or break down to the lower level. So we'll have to see how that plays out. But ultimately, what am I watching? I'm watching the higher time frames at the moment. I will say this: the 4-hour is a little bit interesting. Yeah, we haven't made a lower low just yet. It's just a situation to where if this thing can hold on for a few more candles, then the 4-hour can get something going. It just hasn't happened yet, right? So, I mean, we just recently got into a more bearish posture again on this 1 hour and 2 hour. So I'd like to see how this thing would play out. You want to gain on a bull side. You really do have to gain this top side. So this is pretty easy, actually. You just want to regain these two exhaustion candles on the low time frame. So let's just say that's what, 10,030. I mean, this is ideal short, by the way. I wasn't watching at this time, but that's as clear as it gets right there. I mean, for a low time frame. If I wanted a low time frame short and I get a setup like this is great, right? You basically set yourself a little bit of a range like this. See the range? This would look like this, in case you guys are wondering. Let's just zoom in only on this. Get rid of our Bollinger. Basically, you end up in a situation where you got this candle, stretch, reject. It's trying. This was looking okay, but once you get the rejection, now it takes some time. It doesn't mean, hey, you didn't have to hero short this and have a reason. Now some did. I know there's some big some big sales that popped up in this region. I was peeking at it, but the idea is that when you get this exhaustion candle, you take out the low, that gives you a trade there, right? So, I mean, that in itself is giving you a nice trade, and then you end up taking the bottom side of this original candle, a little bit of a candle count, right? So this, instead of looking like a few 2-hour candles, looks like almost a full day where it's a bearish posture. Take it down. Look at this backfill. This very traditional backfill right there. Rejection. What did I backfill? I backfilled into this new resistance. Right there's another short for you, and then broke down. I didn't play any of that, in case you're wondering. I had myself a busy day. But the idea is what I would be looking for now then is I want to see, am I going to basically look to backfill another one of these areas, which basically these seem on low time frame, like we should be trying to muster something up. Yeah, it looks like it's trying to get something rolling. We'll see. This can roll over here like this. I was smart enough to move my drawing tool so that I won't get stuck over and over like this. But if you see this guy rolling over, it doesn't have to go this far. It could just roll over like right here. But if you see this guy rolling over 40 to 60 on the hourly, that's very low time frame type of stuff, then obviously that wouldn't be too ideal. 2 hour rolling over in that 40 area, even the 40 to 60, same type of thing. That wouldn't be ideal either. That would basically mean you're probably getting to these moving averages and rejecting, and then maybe challenging this area might be a little bit too much for it. So we'll have to see. But more importantly, I would rather see it break down on a 4 hour. That hasn't happened just yet. Any close below here, of course, you have to watch for swing failure type of patterns, but uh, this might just be too much to bear. Again, you got to watch it. That's the thing. So I'm not trying to give you a play. The reality is this is a tight area, and I rather tell you that, hey, I want to see more information than anything else when I'm in this region. But this is interesting because even if I try to stretch this out, doesn't mean this fits specifically. But let's just see where we're at. If I go close to close, even if I go wick to wick here, you can do both. I would say this, this would look like a descending, but if it's dragging out that long, I would want it to test the top side and reject. Otherwise, I would actually feel that this might resolve itself to the bullish side. So let's just see how this plays out. Let's look at this. I'm on a 4 hour. I'm going to go candle close. The candle close is going to be my preference here. Okay, like that. If this guy comes up to this area, sort of retesting this range, and rejects, we get another one of these exhaustion candles, then I would say, all right, it's probably more likely for us to go lower. If that does not occur, now of course we could break down right here, but I'm just saying if we see this guy start to roll back, if not, if we spend some time here and really hold this range, then I would look at this more as an accumulation, and I think that we're going to take this out to the upside. So again, I plan to make a video early tomorrow, and maybe we could talk more about that. If not, I'll try to give some updates. But this is low time frame stuff, obviously, and we're speculating. I didn't tell you too much there. I said we're going up or down, so it's not like I helped a lot in that situation, but just trying to give you a little bit of perspective of how I would kind of begin the process of viewing it. In real time, it's a little bit different, right? Once we get to that point, of course, I'm going to monitor it. This is hindsight type stuff, obviously, but once we got in here, it's like, all right, well, we look like we're breaking down. But when you go to the higher time frame, you say, oh, you got to look around a little bit and say, let me get rid. I don't know why that keeps happening. Hold on. Why is my Control Z not working? Anyway, so what looked like a bearish action was really we took that out, but then you didn't get anywhere. The fact that you then came up and took out that level, backfilled again. So what are you doing? You're reclaiming an area that you just lost that should have been bearish. Then you immediately reclaim it to bullish side, and then you immediately what? Hold the zone. This is how you get a little low time frame play. You could say, all right, well, let me take a low time frame position off of that. We're talking like naked chart type stuff, and say, all right, wait a second. This is showing now I'm supporting an area that just flipped. That's what you want if you can get that. Now, a lot of times you don't get it, right? They don't come back. A lot of times they'll just go. But if you get this little gift where it says, all right, I'm going to give you a bust pattern. So you break down, you actually bust the other way, which means what? It should have broke down, or at least it appeared like it was going to break down. It didn't happen. Instead, it held a little bit of a low time frame accumulation, which you grabbed. It actually allowed you to then show a couple wicks, and then you move it to low time frame to find a play that makes sense, and certainly that would have been a decent tradable scenario over the weekend. So my point is you could start off with one element and that idea can change. So you need to know some TA. You really do. That's not a cop out. That's just reality. The more information you have in real time, the better. But these things are pretty clear. They're really showing up here to see there's a lot going on. It hasn't broken down because there's a lot of reasons why it may not, right? I mean, ultimately, this is one of the main ones right here. So, I mean, you basically have this position here that's been holding. If we lose this area on close now, I would say, all right, well, then we're more than likely at least going to test the bottom side of this, if not further. And who knows if that actually holds in that case. But there's a lot of good things going on, but at the same time, I'll show you one last thing that kind of corresponds to all of this, guys. Right there. Okay. So this is the entire move. We happen to be right at that 0.236. Haven't lost it yet. You see everything's kind of fallen into that same spot. So look, it normally makes sense that if you get an extension like this, you peel back. Ultimately, if it doesn't come back, it's very bullish, right? So, I mean, ultimately, you might have a higher leg. By the way, some people might want to take their leg from different spots, which I completely understand. We're just not going to get into those conversations today. But if you are going to look from low to high, which is a very normal way to look at this process, you've only given back 0.236 of the entire move. So far, that's pretty bullish. But if you lose that area on close, that lines up with about 95.40-ish, I would say on close like a daily scale, then yeah, it makes sense to probably at least wick to this 8,900 range, at least, and possibly 8,400. We have other obstacles in between, which we talked about just on the stream alone. But that starts to open up a little bit more when that happens. Now, what's the downside to this? Look, a lot of times when it does occur, it's going to have a big candle type of scenario where it breaks on through, and you could miss it as well. And by the way, when that happens, you know what I say? Oh well, it is what it is. It has to fit into our trading scenario where we're protecting ourselves. I'm not trying to roll the dice, right? I'm not saying black or red. I'm not playing blackjack here, right? We're not hitting on a on a 16 because the dealer's showing a 10, so we say, oh, let's just take a shot here. No, 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 no. We want to play decent probabilities. So in this type of situation, rather than being in the position where I say, let me go ahead and short the support because if it does break, this is going to happen. No, because ultimately, what a lot of times what happens is you lose there, right? Maybe you lost there too. You might lose two, three times, four times before catching it, and then maybe when it does break, it only breaks like this, comes back and fakes you out and wicks you out anyway. Maybe it's a stop hunt. Maybe it's going to be a failure pattern. So there's a lot of ways that can go wrong. All because you're trying to chase that big candle, which absolutely can happen. But when it happens, it is what it is. It doesn't affect me. I would much rather be in a position to where I say, hey, I'm longing a support, and maybe I catch that decent candle the other way. If it starts to reject on me, so be it. You take some profits anyway, kind of roll from there. All right, this guy went long just talking about local action, so I apologize for that. I apologize if I jumped around a little bit, didn't have it fully organized. I just wanted to get something out to you guys. But I'll do more in-depth information probably tomorrow. If all's well with my son, he is feeling okay. As I mentioned, they didn't say that he has the flu. They did start him on some Tamiflu, etc. So we'll just hope and pray that he's doing better and his fever goes down a bit. Anyway, if you can, like, subscribe. That would definitely help me out. Otherwise, if you have some questions, shoot them to me on Twitter. Just a direct message will do, and I'll try to answer it on the next one. You guys have a great day. This is Mr. Anderson signing out.